kopsiwa. Goodbye, Bayek. Bayek, hello. All right, then. All right, then. All right, then. So long, C1.
Bueno, loco, sumame la XP. Loco. Más uno. Nada más. Necesito 3, 5, 6. Un poquito, boludo, me gasté un montón. No me dio nada.
Bayek, good to see you. All right, then. Farewell, Bayek.
Vamos a comprar de 3, boludo, porque quiero que se me cargue. No sé, ¿me suma esto algo, boludo? A ver, ahora
Bayek,
compro,
hello.
debería de subir todo, digo, subir un nivel.
Goodbye, Bayek.
Ah, no, es que no me da nada, sí. Está bien, vamos a comprar, creo que no me va a dar la plata para
Bayek
6 puntos de XP,
kopsiwa.
la verdad.
All right, then. Good. Good. All right, then.
Diría que
All right, then. All right, then. Farewell, Bayek.
Oh, 3. Piola. Solo 6 más. Creo que me alcanza, creo que me quedo con 0, pero me alcanza.
Bayek, good to see you. All right, then. Good. Good. All right, then. Good. All right, then.
4. Ay, ya me duele, boludo. Me faltan 2 puntos, no sé si llegue. No sé si llegue, boludo. A ver.
Ah, baie
Vamos a
kopsiva.
50.000. Vamos a estar hasta 50.000.
All right then. Good. All right then. Good. Good. All right then. All right then. Bye, Bayek.
Oh, listo, pero compro 2 veces más.
Bayek, good to see you. Good. Farewell, Bayek.
Piola. Bien, 100% de habilidades. Ya vamos. Todas las habilidades. Todas. Estas se pueden mejorar infinitas veces más o menos. Así que mejor. Bien. Bueno, ahora sí, chicos, ahora sí tenemos el 100% del juego. Vámonos acá y nos vamos al menú principal. Pantalla del título, que nos tenemos que ir al modo descubrimiento. Es el siguiente coso a completar. Sí, hay que leer nomás. O sea, es un montón. Nos queda cambiar de personaje a Reda. Y acá. Dice, el Mouseión de Alejandría. Está vestido, Reda, wow.
Welcome to the Mouseion of Alexandria. The Mouseion was a sector of the city commissioned by Ptolemy I to rival Athens' Academy as an institute of intellectual pursuit. Dedicated to the 9 inspiring muses, the Mouseion became a great center for philosophical and scientific enlightenment. It welcomed scholars from many kingdoms, inviting them to share knowledge in literature, science, and geography. The Mouseion was designed so that its buildings and grounds would accommodate free thinking, debate, and presentation. Meeting spaces and theaters surrounded a main courtyard. Expansive gardens were filled with exotic plants that aided in the study and supply of herbs and medicines. A zoo offered the study of animal behavior and physiology. Also among the Mouseion's many star attractions was its astronomical observatory. Herophilus was a physician who lived most of his life in Alexandria. He was able to perform the dissection of human cadavers on a large scale due to the permissiveness of the city in such matters. Among many other discoveries, he learned that the brain was central to the human nervous system. He also extensively mapped the blood system and measured the pulse with the aid of a water clock. It is reported that in his thirst to understand human anatomy, he performed 600 vivisections on live prisoners. In order to be free to pursue their research, scholars were fed and housed at the Mouseion at the government's expense. This freedom provided Alexandria's scholars a meeting space for intellectual pursuits and a haven for spiritual peace. Though nothing remains of the original Mouseion, it lives on as the legacy of our modern museums.
Welcome to the Serapion of Alexandria. In a city of numerous magnificent attractions, the Serapion was considered to be the most beautiful temple of Alexandria. Located southwest of the city, on a small hill known as the Acropolis, the sanctuary was constructed during the reign of Ptolemy III, upon foundations which had existed since the reign of Ptolemy I Soter. Visitors of the Serapion climbed 100 steps to reach the courtyard. Libraries were installed in the porticos surrounding the square building, with its roof and columns adorned with gold and gilded bronze. Pharaohs were generous to the temple, as were several Roman emperors after Egypt's conquest. An inner temple housed the statue of Serapis, dedicated to healing the sick. Since the 26th dynasty, Greeks in Egypt had gradually integrated the Egyptian cult of the Apis bull to their own rituals. With the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the cult of Apis was further integrated into Greek religion. During his rule, Ptolemy I chose to merge Egyptian and Hellenic gods into a syncretic divinity named Serapis. This name was the result of the amalgamation of Osiris and Apis. With this new deity, the Ptolemaic dynasty managed to accommodate similar belief sets for two different cultures, bringing about a new dynastic cult. Serapis was also associated to other deities, including Asclepius, a Greek god of healing. It is possible that, as with the Serapis Temple of Canopus, the sick would visit this sanctuary, sleeping there overnight in the hopes of being healed within its hallowed halls.
Personajes cambiamos, ahora somos el actor.
Welcome to the Islands of Ferris. The Heptastadion was a bridge-like causeway connecting the island of Ferris to mainland Alexandria. Its name is based on the Greek terms of measurement, hepta, meaning 7, and stadion, which is a measure of length of roughly 180 meters. Since its construction would separate the Grand Port to the east and the port of Eunostos to the west, it was designed with channels at each end. These openings allowed passage from one port to the other. Along with creating separate harbors for the commercial and military shipping, the causeway served as a main aqueduct for the island's inhabitants. Its presence also helped protect the island and its ports from rough wind and sea currents. At the end of antiquity, the Heptastadion disappeared under layers of silt and soil, which formed an important sedimentary deposit.
Yalla, yalla.
Un poquito más lento. La isla de Gloria. Pasaste de la... Ay,
While the Serapion was the most celebrated of the temples in Alexandria, many other temples were built within the city. Most of these structures have been completely erased over time, and there is no way to discern how many existed. However, research of ancient papyri offered tantalizing hints as to the possible location of at least some of the temples.
La busca de Cleopatra y la torre de Gloria. Las torres de los Romalos.
Both papyri and coins reveal evidence of many temples built for the gods. Poseidon, the god of the sea, likely had an edifice in his honor west of this island, as well as on the mainland. This temple next to you is dedicated to Isis Pharia, the divine protector of the lighthouse. This location hosted annual celebrations in the month of April, known as the Sacrum Pharia, in connection to the lighthouse. In her incarnation as Isis Fortuna, the goddess carries a rudder and a cornucopia, both symbols of good luck for navigators.
يلا يلا
يلا.
اخ داخل يا ها
Considered one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria was a source of great pride for the inhabitants of the city. Construction began under Ptolemy I's reign and lasted 15 years. It was completed during his son's rule. Once completed, the lighthouse was dedicated to the gods for the salvation of those who sail the sea. Built on the island of Pharis, the stone structure was 3 tiers set on top of one another in a step formation. The second floor consisted of an octagonal tower, and the top floor was a cylindrical tower topped by a statue. The interior provided space for staff rooms and a ramp which allowed the transport of fuel to the upper floors.
No, el faro, mira. Farol.
Essential to safe navigation through the rifts and shallow waters, the Pharis was a functioning lighthouse with a beam reportedly visible 50 kilometers away. It's unclear what kind of fuel was used or how much. Any other details of how the light worked remain a mystery. For several centuries, the Pharis was one of the highest monuments ever built by man. It measured roughly 110 meters in height, compared to the Pyramid of Giza, which was around 140 meters tall. Gradually, the structure was eroded by earthquakes and then completely destroyed in 1480 CE, when a fort was built over it. Archaeological excavations on the seabed have uncovered many blocks from the ancient building.
No, cuidado, no te vayas a tirar así. Como abajo, culo. No, peleado, sí. Claro, que después días de ninguno de no te morís. No, van a ver. No, pero es un buen modo. La resistencia del actor, boludo. Bueno. El panellón. Ah, no, no tiene nada. Tiene una parada.
Welcome to the Panean. The Panean was a temple built in honor of the god Pan, divinity of nature. This Greek god, often represented as a half-man, half-goat, with a beard, horns, and goat's hooves, was considered the protector of shepherds and herds. Pan's attribute was his namesake musical instrument, the pan flute. His temples were usually located in caves and on high mountains, and were frequented by shepherds. It is likely that Mediterranean cults adopted the imagery of Pan to symbolize the Christian devil.
Oh, no me carga el directo, boludo, la puta madre. Se me bugueó YouTube. Sos Papi 23. Is the game fun? Well, right now what I'm playing is the discovery mode of the game. But the game base, talking about the base game, sorry. Yes, I think it is. Completing it, completing it totally, how can I say that in English? Took me 93 hours, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. The story was fine, and the mechanics of the game were pretty addictive. I think I said that well. So yes, I would recommend it. I mean, I think there are more enjoyable games. Like for example, The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and stuff. But this, Assassin's Creed Origins, it's a really good game. besides, if you play this game, you will understand the story from the two games that came out. That, well, they are Odyssey and Valhalla. So yeah, hope this opinion was useful. Sorry for my rough English. It's from my main language, you know. But well, this part of the game is like a discovery tour. Basically, you go through iconic iconic monuments of Egypt, right? And you get a man and a woman will teach you the story of that place. It's okay, you know, it's useful, I guess, because it's information, but it's not. Well, it has a lot of things from the main game. I don't know how to say it. It has a lot of, you know, a lot of aspects of the base game are not here. So yeah. By the way, the character I'm using right now is not the same as
To give proper honor to the god, Alexandrians built an artificial hill upon which they housed his temple to compensate for the flat relief of the city. The artificial mound had the shape of a spinning top or a pine cone, which was accessed by a spiral staircase. The top had a panoramic view of the entire city. Only such heights would be fitting for a mountain god.
next character. That would be noble. Okay, noble. Alright. Blue.
Welcome to the Hippodrome of Alexandria. The main hippodrome of the city was called the Legeon, in honor of Lagos, the ancestor of the Ptolemies. Alexandrians were great lovers of horse racing. They were fascinated by the rivalry of these races, the agon, as it was said at that time, that every competition brought. It was a struggle for glory. The most important chariot race was the Tethrapon. Using 4 horses with the quickest harness to the front right, the charioteer would race for 12 laps, with sharp turns at either end of the hippodrome. The victors were crowned with garlands of olive and received prize money, but the most sought-after reward was to be acclaimed by the works of poets, such as Callimachus and Pindar. Ye hymns that rule the lyre, what god, what hero, aye, and what man shall we loudly praise? Verily Zeus is the lord of Pisa, and Heracles established the Olympic festival, while Theron must be proclaimed by reason of his victorious chariot with its 4 horses. Theron, who is just in his regard for guests, and who is the bulwark of Acragas, the choicest flower of an auspicious line of sires, whose city towers on high, bringing wealth and glory to crown their native merits.
Let's select the other character, which is right. Let's go to the next thing. Where this is? Alright, passport. Egypt. Big. I don't know how to say it in English. Of Egypt. Let's go. Golden Age of Pyramids took place. Meanwhile, I don't know how to say it in English either. Spoiler it.
Welcome to the major regions of Egypt.
So bad I did. Let's go.
Life in ancient Egypt was concentrated along the shores of the Nile and divided into two regions. Lower Egypt was situated on the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean, and Upper Egypt was at the south reaching into Africa. Due to its proximity to the Mediterranean, temperatures in Lower Egypt were less extreme than in Upper Egypt.
Nice. That is annoying.
Until 3100 BCE and the unification of Egypt, each region had its own pharaoh and crown. Lower Egypt's crown was red and marked with symbols of papyrus and bees. Upper Egypt's crown was white with symbols of lotus and sedge grass. Both regions had competing major cities, most notably Memphis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. There were different religious cults in both regions, each worshipping their own major gods. Many of the temples were designed in such a way as to represent the two regions, and ceremonies often incorporated Upper and Lower Egypt in their rituals.
Right. Roman soldier. Let's go here. Damn. El Río Nilo, fuente de vida.
Welcome to Bringer of Life, the River Nile.
Ano yun?
The ancient Egyptians called the dark fertile soil of the Nile the Black Lands, and the surrounding desert was referred to as the Red Lands. The dramatic difference of productive land opposed to barren desert had a deep influence on cultural ideology, mythology, and religion.
Mira, look at this. Yeah, you're right. One is dark as fuck and the other is, yellow.
The Nile determined much of Egyptian civilization. For example, the seasonal cycle of the Nile was so consistent that ancient Egyptians created their calendar around it.
Wow.
The flood season, or Akhet, was when the departing floodwaters left arable soil for crops. It was followed by the growing and harvesting seasons, known as Peret and Shemu. These regular seasons, along with abundant wildlife and rich soil, meant that Egypt's denizens were able to nourish themselves and ensure their country's strength in trade. The River Nile, flowing from the south to the north, neatly traversed through both Upper and Lower Egypt. All of Egypt's major cities were built along this narrow ribbon of life. Protected by mountain ranges and deserts which acted as natural barriers to enemies, and sustained by the Nile's plants and wildlife, Egyptian civilization enjoyed economic and cultural prosperity for over 4,000 years.
Memphis is actually pretty small, isn't it? There you can see the iconic two buildings there. Nothing more, dude. Oh, they're far away. Okay, like there. There. Let me see Memphis. They are there. Yeah. They are indeed far away.
Both ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks referred to the Nile as the river in their respective languages. Stretching a distance of over 6,700 kilometers, the Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world. It flows south to north, spanning 11 countries. The River Nile originates in the region of the Great Subequatorial Lakes, including one of the largest in the world, Lake Victoria near Tanzania. The river flows through African equatorial forests, swamps, volcanic lands, steppes, and deserts, splitting apart for a while and picking up various sediments from each region and carrying them all the way to Egypt. Its main artery, known as the White Nile, rejoins with the Blue Nile in Khartoum. This is where it weaves through rich deposits of silt and nutrients, carrying them along in its wake. The Nile crosses 6 cataracts from the south to the north, creating natural obstacles between the various sections of the river. The cataracts are long zones of about 100 kilometers, where the bubbling and rapidly swirling waters advance tumultuously amid enormous heaps of rocks and benches of hard stone.
So the Vegas we're talking about. Okay. No, they're not. That's so far away. What? No. What? No. Really?
It is after crossing Nubia and the First Cataract that the river officially returns to Egypt in Aswan. There are still 1,000 kilometers before it reaches Cairo and the Delta, bringing life to those living on its shores before it eventually empties into the Mediterranean Sea.
Que la mierda. Todas esas herramientas, zapatillas y civilizaciones. Una barra de hierro que pasa del piso de la tierra. Todo. Todo. Buen manejo, ¿no? Eso es la verdad.
Ancient Egyptian irrigation and water use was centered around the Nile. However, they also had access to streams and rivers, as well as several large lakes. The delta, situated at the north end of the Nile, also known as Lower Egypt, is a large irrigated area where the river splits into several tributaries. The delta had several major brackish coastal lakes, bodies of water separated from the sea by thin strips of land. A mix of deep to shallow waters, salt swamps, and sand plains, these lakes were refuge to a wealth of species, as well as water and land plants. The occasional bandit could also be found sheltering within the denser reeds, waiting for the unwary traveler.
Una mano de 94%, wow. 94.
Welcome to Deserts of Egypt. Reaching out on either side of the lush Nile are the harsh, arid Western Desert and the mountainous Eastern Desert. They cover nearly 94% of Egypt. Each of these parent deserts have their own microclimate and contain several smaller deserts with a distinctive fauna and flora. Whale fossils were discovered within the depths of the Sahara. Known as the Valley of the Whales, this location is evidence of the seas which once covered the area. The White Desert in the northeast of the Sahara owes its name to its white limestone soil, contrasting with the yellow sand. The wind has eroded the rocks of the White Desert into stone mushrooms, the most famous of which is referred to as the Finger of God.
Whoa! Ela. Yeah!
The Great Sand Sea is a large unbroken desert that reaches out through western Egypt and eastern Libya. It is home to a unique geological formation known as Libyan silica glass. The pale yellowish-green material ranges from pebble-sized fragments to glass rocks the size of rough boulders.
Alright.
Welcome to the Qattara. The Qattara Depression is located in the northwest part of Egypt. Reaching 18,000 square kilometers, the basin is 133 meters below sea level and covered with salt. It is the second lowest point in Africa, after the Afar Depression. The climate is very arid, with average temperatures reaching 36 degrees Celsius. The famous Siwa Oasis is located on the protected southwestern region. Today, the Qattara Depression is utilized for oil exploration. Welcome to Siwa. The Siwa Oasis is in the western desert of Egypt. Geographically, the Siwan Oasis is located in a depression 20 meters below sea level. Its natural springs and warm climate aided in the bountiful production of date trees. Though clearly influenced to some degree by Egyptian and African culture, the area's isolation resulted in a unique society and language. While they worshipped the same deities, Siwan temple architecture differed from traditional Egyptian temples. Old Kingdom Egyptians referred to the oasis as cauldron, due to its unique geographical structure. Oases were crucial for nomadic tribes and caravans. Without them, there was no chance of survival in an otherwise harsh landscape. As such, oases quickly became hubs for trade, as well as areas of political control. Because of the dry climate, there is very little rainfall to sustain the oases. Instead, underground rivers flood the natural basins. Since many oases have a north-south orientation parallel to the Nile, some geologists suggest they were once tributaries of the mighty river. There is evidence that ancient Egyptians attempted to create some oases. The Libyan oases are the best known, as they are geographically and culturally linked to the Nile Valley and the Delta. These western oases have a distinct geology from the other regions of Egypt. The most famous and important oases are Karga, Dakhla, Farafra, Baharia, and Siwa.
Ela. Oh.
The Spring of the Sun is one of many thermal sources in Siwa, with the particularity that Cleopatra would have bathed in this one, giving it its name. The presence of the source beneath was attested already by Herodotus during the 5th century BCE, when the oasis was called Amuneion by the Greeks of Cyrene.
Mierda, me imaginaba yo estando ahí muerto. Además de qué es este aquí.
Whoa.
Subí.
Oracles predicted the future, delivered omens that could be more or less obscure, and offered divine guidance. The Siwan Oracle was considered one of the 3 greatest of the ancient world, alongside the oracles of Delphi and Dodoni. Because of the Greek colonies in Cyrenaica, the temple associated Zeus with the worship of Ammon. It is no wonder that Alexander the Great made the perilous journey to Siwa in order to consult the oracle, emulating the actions of mythical heroes such as Hercules and Perseus. This action earned the approval of the oracle, who validated his claim as Pharaoh of Egypt. He was confirmed as the son of Ammon, conferring upon him the most legitimate claim to date of all Egypt's foreign invaders. The powerful and the rich would send gifts or travel great distances in order to ensure their good fortune by gaining the blessing of the Oracle of Siwa. Every successful blessing only increased the soothsayer's prestige. Runner Eubotus, a famous citizen of Cyrene, consulted the Oracle in order to know if he would win the 93rd Olympic Games race in 408 BCE. He did, enhancing the standing of the C1 Oracle in the process. The Temple of the Oracle of Amun was built in the 6th century BCE by Pharaoh Amasis. In the game, its entrance is guarded by ram-headed sphinxes, the animal representing Amun. They were inspired by similar statuary located at the British Museum. Another option would have a Greek-influenced representation of Zeus Amun, a human-headed sphinx with horns. This representation of Zeus Amun was very popular in Siwa.
Pero no toques. No, cabrón. Buena.
Welcome to the Fayum. The Fayum Oasis is an enormous basin in the western desert that formed from the Nile's overflow. As such, it is not considered a true oasis, though it gives its name to the region, which covers Lake Morris. The oasis harbors some of the oldest archaeological artifacts of the region, indicating that the area has been inhabited by hunters and gatherers since the Neolithic period. The Fayum Oasis drains into Lake Moeris, which was a large freshwater lake, but at some time became a saltwater lake. In the 12th dynasty, ancient Egyptians redirected the water flow with a dam and dug a supply canal using the lake as their reservoir. Irrigation enabled them to continue growing crops of figs, grapes, and olives year-round. Reed boats, feluccas, triremes, and kerkeros were the most commonly found craft within the landlocked waters of Egypt. They were used for various purposes, ranging from daily fishing, trade, warfare, and travel, to the ferrying of massive stone blocks used to build the great monuments of Egypt. The most impressive pyramids of ancient Egypt date from the Old Kingdom and can be found on the sites of Giza, Saqqara, and Dashur. However, one particularly famous pyramid of the time is located elsewhere. During the Middle Kingdom, some pharaohs chose the Fayum as their final resting place. One such ruler was Amenemhat III. His pyramid left a mark on the imagination of antique chroniclers. They referred to it as the Labyrinth, mostly due to the vast mortuary temple complex at the foot of the pyramid. Herodotus mentioned that he had visited 12 courts and over 3,000 of its chambers. But he was also well known for being prone to hyperbole. Amenemhat's pyramid was built with a brick core and covered with stone slabs, designed to be impenetrable. The burial chamber, made out of a single block of sandstone, is unique in its design. Richard Lepsius and Flinders Petrie both explored the pyramid site, measuring 385 meters by 158 meters, and identified it as the location of the labyrinth. Their research conditions were difficult, as most of the site had been submerged by the nearby canal. Furthermore, the stones from the complex and the outer casing of the pyramid had been quarried away long ago. Ubisoft decided to give life back to this lost monument and the many crypts that were said to be devoted to the sacred crocodile god, Sobek. Founded during the 5th dynasty, the site was popular during the 12th dynasty under the name of Shedet. During the Ptolemaic era, the metropolis was named Crocodilopolis by the Greeks, in honor of the crocodile god Sobek. During the Greco-Roman era, the Cleruks, soldiers of the Ptolemies, settled there after their military service and expanded the irrigation systems. Irrigation and water distribution tripled the arable land and turned the city into a lush and rich area. 27,000 inhabitants lived in its precinct at its height. The city's location was strategic in controlling the many small waterways connecting to the main canal, and thus the Nile. region's main cult was that of Sobek of Shedet, a divinity associated with water and fertility, both very important to an area that depended on irrigation. Many local villages had the title Town of Sobek added to their official designations. During festivals, ancient Egyptians recited hymns to Sobek, asking for his divine intervention. Greek settlers, and later Romans, would help the Temple of Sobek's economy to flourish by adopting the local embalming mortuary rites. Their sarcophagi were beautifully painted and adorned with amazingly realistic portraits. Very similar to the cult of the Apis bull in Memphis, a living crocodile was worshipped within the precinct of Crocodilopolis's main temple. Known as Sobek to the Egyptians and Sukkos to the Greeks, it was reported by Strabo that priests fed it with meat, wine, and honeyed milk. They covered its body with jewels and gold. After its death, it was embalmed and placed within the crocodile's grotto, alongside thousands of other mummified crocodiles.
El reducto, ¿no?
Welcome to the city of Memphis. Throughout all ancient Egyptian periods, cities had one thing in common. They were situated along the Nile's shores. Cities were often designated for government or for worship. Major cities had several temples dedicated to numerous gods and goddesses. Egyptians referred to the organization of their cities as a sepat, or later on by the Persian term nome. There were 20 sepat in Lower Egypt and 22 in Upper Egypt. The capital city of ancient Egypt changed many times over the periods.
Memphis es una de ellas. La más antigua, pero una de ellas seguro. Después vino Alexandria. Sí, no, ahora es Alejandría, ahora no Alejandría.
Hey!
One of the largest was Memphis, located in Lower Egypt. It was a key center for religious temples, including their most important deity, Ptah, god of creation. Thebes, located in Upper Egypt, competed with Memphis and featured as both a political and a religious center. Two important temples, Luxor and Karnak, were built there. A minor capital of the Sayyid dynasty was the city of Sais. This was the last native Egyptian capital of Egypt.
Hey!
During the Third Dynasty, Under Pharaoh Djoser, Memphis became the first religious and administrative capital of Egypt.
La primera.
Even when the political capital of Egypt decentralized itself, pharaohs were crowned in this sacred city in order to legitimize their ascension to the throne, up to and including Alexander the Great. Though little remains today save ruins south of Cairo, we can guess at the structure of the city, which stretched up to 5 kilometers in length and 2 kilometers in width.
Re chiquita. Re chiquita Memphis. Madre.
Memphis was also referred to as the City with the 100 Doors, or the White Walls. These names were in reference to the wall which surrounded the city. Under the protection of Ptah, god of craftsmen, the city was a thriving religious and economic hub.
Oh. No sé todo esto. Bueno, la pero suena que puede llegar a ser así. Redescubridor de Egipto. Así es.
Αδα είσαι εσύ. Γνώση είναι λάβρη, ουδε πόποτε κατέχεις.
Ιδιότην, ελάβνη νούκι γνώστης.
οφθαλμής γαρ δια νέα νεογήν. Ου κοράς βλάξ.
Αμάξα ελάβνης κακίστεως, αμέλησον.
Αμελής εσύ, ούτε λάβνης εις νόσκης, φαύλε.
Welcome to Rediscovering Egypt. In the 19th century, the increased intensity of tourism and excavations, as well as the outflow of antiquities to other countries, threatened Egypt's archaeological heritage. Egyptians took part in this destruction by ransacking sites for artifacts to sell, quarrying stones from ancient monuments, and removing sebak, ancient mud bricks, to reuse for their own purposes. A major step in conserving Egypt's heritage was taken in 1858, when the Viceroy of Egypt created the Antiquities Service. Supported by a team of foreign scholars, Auguste Mariette exerted an iron grip on the service. He carried out his work across Egypt and into Nubia, intervening on almost every major site. Aware of the necessity of keeping unearthed artifacts in Egypt, Mariette requested a museum be created for that purpose in 1858. This museum was the ancestor of the Egyptian Museum. Gaston Maspero, Mariette's successor, expanded and reorganized the Antiquities Service and instigated laws regulating the export of artifacts. French scholars ran the service until it passed into Egyptian hands in the 1950s. As of the mid-19th century, Egyptology was fast becoming a recognized discipline within both private institutions and learned societies. A French architect, archaeologist, and former researcher, Jean-Claude Golvin, now specializes in the artistic reconstruction of ancient cities and monuments. To date, he has created more than 800 drawings, which include 3 volumes focusing on the reconstitution of ancient Egypt. His work is exquisitely detailed and can be found in books and museums around the world. The team was thrilled to collaborate with Jean-Claude Galvin in order to recreate Egypt for the game. In the 19 exclusive watercolors he created for the team, Galvin used scientific data as the base and then extrapolated to provide a full interpretation of various locations and monuments in ancient Egypt. Both early sketches and fully rendered images were then used by the team as references while building the world of Assassin's Creed Origins. Although ancient Egypt's rich religious culture and its mortuary monuments continue to be investigated, the modern discipline of Egyptology has shifted focus. Rather than single-mindedly retrieving impressive artifacts, Egyptologists today focus instead on increasing the body of knowledge. In the past, excavations took place in the field, and while that is still the case today, much of the work on Egyptology now takes place in libraries and archives. Today, archaeology in Egypt relies on an interdisciplinary approach, where traditional Egyptologists are helped by a wide spectrum of scientists from other disciplines and new, non-invasive techniques. GPS data, satellite imaging, and ground-penetrating radar allow archaeologists to gain a sense of what lies underneath the ground before excavating.
Welcome to natron is a colorless salt that was used by ancient Egyptians for food preservation, cleansing products, and glassmaking. It was also used in the mummification process. During the ceremonial embalmment ritual, the priests packed the body in natron in order to remove all of the moisture. Once the body was thoroughly desiccated, they could begin the wrapping. Natron was mined in Wadi Natron. The main mining methods involved either cutting slices out of the lake bed when it was dry, or raking through mineral-saturated water to gather the mineral salts during the floods. Both techniques are still used today and inspired the team in their recreation of the mines located in the mountains northwest of Memphis. Welcome to Fauna of Ancient Egypt. Both domesticated and wild animals were features in ancient Egyptian bas-reliefs as early as the First Dynasty. While the variety of wildlife served as a reliable food source, it also influenced both culture and mythology. Egypt's terrain allowed for a diverse range of animals, including panthers, rhinoceroses, elephants, and many variations of antelopes. The Nile was home to many species of fish, along with hippopotami and crocodiles. The wide variety of birds that populated the riverbanks, from raptors and waterfowl to songbirds, were all cataloged within Egyptian hieroglyphic signs. Encounters with reptiles and insects, such as cobras, scorpions, and scarabs, influenced hieroglyphs and art. While all animals had sacred meanings, lions in particular represented power and royalty to ancient Egyptians. They were so prized by pharaohs that they were hunted to extinction within Egypt. Welcome to... The climate and unique geography of the Nile Delta offered a wide variety of plant species. Many of these plants served as sustenance for ancient Egyptians and as crops for trade. The Nile's consistent seasons allowed Egypt to sustain itself for centuries. Possibly the most useful of the plants was the papyrus. This tall sedge plant grew in abundance along the water's edge of the Nile. Commonly known for its use as paper, the ancient Egyptians found many other functions for it, including rope, sandals, and mats. Papyriform boats made from the plant are seen in paintings and reliefs, and were used in ritualistic ceremonies. There were many types of trees along the River Nile, such as the date palm, carob, and tamarisk. The earliest fruit tree cultivated was the fig tree, followed by apple, pomegranate, and eventually olive trees during the era of the New Kingdom. Mango cultivation was the result of a late import from Asia during the Middle Ages. Some trees were associated with gods, such as the acacia with Horus. The divinities Thoth and Seshat were depicted inscribing the reign of the king into a Persea tree. The sycamore was connected with the goddess Iset, patron of the ritual of life. Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics were used as sacred writing, appearing on monuments, statues, and sacred papyrus texts. The earliest symbols that resemble hieroglyphs were on pottery dating back to 4000 BCE. This stylized form of signs and drawings was the only writing used from its ancient origins to the end of pharaonic history. Ancient Egyptians referred to hieroglyphs as the writing of the gods. Considered a difficult language, it was intended for pharaohs, nobility, and priests, and meant to be used in ceremonies, within tombs, and for government records. Since few Egyptians were able to read the ancient hieroglyphs, the mythological aura around the language was persistent, even in their own culture. The structure of hieroglyphs offers insight into Egyptian culture, not just in what the translations say, but in the structure of the symbols themselves. They were found on tomb walls, on sarcophagi, on statues, and on pottery, and were meticulously recorded in countless ancient papyri. In many temples, priests would perform rituals and daily offerings. These were accompanied by hieroglyphs used as spells. In tomb paintings, the hieroglyphs are represented with formulas to recite. These spoken words were meant to be spells which would allow the deceased to benefit from the offerings for all eternity. Spells and offerings were also written for the living, to enhance medicines and cure illnesses. The most famous of ancient Egyptian documents is the Book of the Dead. Written in hieroglyphs and hieratic texts, it depicts important spells and rituals. These spells were intended to ensure a smooth transition from life to death and allow the deceased to safely navigate the perils of the afterlife. Even after it was deciphered, the reading of hieroglyphs remained difficult at times due to the many directions in which they can be read. Depending on the orientation of the signs, hieroglyphs can be read left to right, right to left, horizontally or vertically, though never bottom to top. A clue on which way to read is to first notice which direction the figurative signs are facing. If a pictogram is looking to the right, then the reader is meant to start from the right and read towards the figure. Column text on a papyrus begins from the right, then goes top to bottom for each column. Text written on tomb walls resembles the structure of a page from a comic book. The text can be placed in front, behind, or above the character, and its symbols look in the same direction as the character. Another clue is that the name of a god or hieroglyphs meaning gods or kings are always written before the descriptive text. Compared to alphabetical languages, Egyptian hieroglyphs have more symbols. Confronted with the absence of vowels, the Egyptians invented a category of signs. When placed at the end of words, these signs help inform its meaning. For instance, a drawing of a lion will refer to a lion and also relate to the abstract concept of a lion as something dangerous or powerful. Text written on tomb walls resembles the structure of a page from a comic. Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs contained a little more than 700 signs. By the end of the Greco-Roman period, there were 10,000 signs. Egyptologist Sir Alan Gardner created a list classifying common hieroglyphic signs and their variants.
قبة استعيب أو نعمك جش سكمت بكسه هنسب
Ancient Egyptian languages have many similarities with Asian and African languages. They have evolved in similar ways to the various forms of written Egyptian. These languages belong to the Hamito-Semitic group. There were 5 clear evolutions in the Egyptian language, each with their own distinctive structure. These languages are known as Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. Coptic is the only living language that allows linguists to define the vowel structure and to distinguish different dialects. While hieroglyphs and hieratic script give us an idea as to how the ancient Egyptian language was structured and written, the way it was spoken is still up for debate. The team opted for English as the spoken language, with the characters using ancient Egyptian and Greek words and accents. The language that is spoken in the background by the crowds is largely based on Sir Alan Gardner's Egyptian grammar. To help resurrect a dead language, we consulted Egyptologists and dialogue coaches to establish our target sound and cast actors with Arabic, Hebraic, and African backgrounds to bring the game to life. After Alexander the Great's arrival in Egypt and the establishment of his reign, Greek became the language used by the governing bodies. The inability to read hieroglyphs caused resentment among the Greek population. It's from this tension that the Rosetta Stone was created. The spread of Christianity ended pharaonic culture and resulted in the destruction of its pagan monuments. This also marked the end of hieroglyphic writing and understanding. Welcome to... Between the 5th century CE and the Renaissance, knowledge of hieroglyphs was entirely lost. Many enthusiasts tackled the challenge of deciphering the language with little success. Some groundwork was made with various researchers identifying names and some grammatical structure, and confirming that cartouches were markers for royal names. They were still missing a critical piece of information that would eventually be revealed thanks to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone was found in 1799 by Bouchard, a soldier in Napoleon's army.
No, típico.
The stela dates from 196 BCE, written in ancient Egyptian and Greek with 3 scripts: hieroglyphics, Demotic, and Greek alphabet. Following the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1801, the English took possession of the stone. It has been at the British Museum since 1802 and remains the most visited object of the museum to date.
Ah, ya leo el comentario.
The first translation was of the Greek section only in 1803. It detailed a decree of Pharaoh Ptolemy V, reminding the citizens that their pharaoh had led Egypt to prosperity. It was fully translated 20 years after by Jean-François Champollion, who was working with a facsimile.
Fua. 1000 años después, no exactamente, pero...
Yes, amen.
Through his studies of the stone, Champollion was able to make a critical observation that would unlock the whole mystery: that hieroglyphics were not only ideograms, but also phonograms. Hieroglyphs consist of phonetic glyphs, single characters, and logograms. Essentially, they are a combination of phonetics, alphabet, and full words, which in total form a language.
Tenía una letra parecida a la mía. No, tiene la mía peor todavía.
While studying the stone, Champollion realized that there was a difference in the number of hieroglyphic characters in relation to the number of Greek characters for the same word. This led him to believe that hieroglyphs must have phonetic characteristics. This was the first step to unlocking the Rosetta Stone's secrets.
Me hace reír, boludo, lo épico que te deberías sentir al descubrir todo este tipo de cosas, amigo.
To prove this theory, Champollion began identifying Egyptian rulers' names and then compared their phonetic pronunciation to the Greek version. For example, Cheops had been the Greek name given by ancient chroniclers to the owner of the Great Pyramid, Khufu. The next step for Champollion was to confirm that his approach was verifiable by using the Philae obelisk as an additional reference. Engraved in the obelisk are 2 inscriptions in Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek. Once he confirmed the names of Ptolemy and Cleopatra within these texts and confirmed the same phonetic patterns as on the Rosetta Stone, Champollion knew he was on the right track.
Claro, esta es básicamente la explicación de cómo Shipwreck y Champollion redescubrió los secretos jeroglíficos o algo así, su significado.
Champollion had already mastered several ancient languages when he took on deciphering the Rosetta Stone. He used his knowledge of Coptic to identify the solar disk hieroglyph on the obelisk as the phonetic translation of Ra. Further translation only strengthened his conclusion. Egyptian hieroglyphs encompass the alphabet in both phonetics and determinative ways, which means that the symbol represents the word itself.
Estamos viendo algo de esto en comunicación. Che, amigos, ¿cómo es que podés escuchar mi voz? Porque, a ver, es como, mi voz es muy... Es como mi micrófono está roto a medias, se escucha muy mal, digamos, muy bajita. Así que me sorprende que... escuches bien. Bueno, no sé si lo escuchas bien, pero no me escuchás. Sigue la fundación de Cirene. Cirene es como la ciudad más influenciada por los romanos, los griegos, los romanos. La verdad que me sorprende. A mí siempre me dijeron que se me escuchaba para el orto y yo mismo lo escuchaba para el orto, pero no. Me parece que todos los hombres se escuchan más en luchar contra sus enemigos que contra los
Welcome to Cyrene. Cyrenaica stretches across the coast of northwest Africa. It was known as Pentapolis in antiquity, a reference to the 5 main cities that formed the Greek colonies. Built on a lush plateau of the Green Mountains, in what is present-day Libya, a colony of Greek settlers formed the city of Cyrene in 630 BCE. Cyrene's population quickly grew, spreading out across the terraces of the plateau, making it the first and largest of the 5 colonies.
Mapa del mundo de Eratóstenes, de Cirene, alrededor del año 240 a.C. Bueno, sí, más o menos para el otro. Bueno, me alegra, la verdad.
The city of Cyrene was founded by Batos Aristotle, guided by the Oracle of Delphi. Overcrowded and suffering from drought, Batos's home island of Thera could not sustain its citizens. Batos consulted the oracle, who told them to journey to the North African coast in search of arable land. A series of kings reigned over the city in the first 2 centuries. However, rebellion eventually ended the monarchy, and henceforth the city was governed by the aristocracy.
Cecilio II, el rey de Cirene, supervisando el pesado y almacenaje del pesado de pasado. Ah, no, el pesado what? Ah, el pesado del...
The key features of Cyrene were temples dedicated to gods, Apollo, Demeter, and Zeus, alongside Ptolemaic gods such as Isis and Serapis. A large agora defined the city's center, and on the western edge, the famed Acropolis was built. A fortification wall was added around the harbor at the end of the 2nd century CE. As the city grew, more buildings were constructed beyond the walls.
Bueno, estas solo están... Pero estos son soldados romanos, no griegos. Por eso... A ver, bueno, tal vez explica más adelante lo que hablo.
Under Roman influence, Cyrene became an economic powerhouse, rising in status throughout the Mediterranean. Cyrene's School of Medicine rivaled all others except for that of the Greek city Kos. Some of the great minds in ancient math, astronomy, and geography were born or established in the various schools of the city, which included an institute of philosophy founded by Aristippus, a pupil of Socrates.
Bajo la influencia romana, Cirene se convirtió en un importante centro económico. Claro, se influenció romanamente. Creo que no... Esa palabra no existe romanamente, pero bueno. Su renombrada escuela...
From 115 to 117 CE, there was a revolt in the Jewish quarter that greatly damaged the city of Cyrene. Over time, a succession of battles, poor management of its silphium crop, and earthquakes eventually took their toll on the city. It was completely abandoned in 365 CE.
Completamente abandonada.
The nearby port of Apollonia was an ideal location, with its natural cove, sheltered by 2 islands and rocky inlets. Along with a lighthouse, the port was later equipped with quays and warehouses to accommodate the increased shipping traffic.
Unos dibujos que hicieron acá. Lo que sí me sorprende es cómo de chiquitas eran las ciudades. Porque, a ver, el juego las hace más chiquitas aún a propósito para que, a ver, entren en el mapa, claro. Pero en la vida real, con los tamaños reales, no eran muy grandes. A ver, fíjense a Polonia. Lo mismo con Memphis, era de 5 kilómetros y de ancho 2. O sea, mira, amigo. Wow.
With its success as a commercial trading port, Apollonia surpassed Cyrene to eventually become the capital of the Pentapolis. A number of earthquakes gradually shifted the city, causing many of its original structures to sink. Some of its ruins can still be seen underwater.
Mira, en un paisaje nublado, son las de ahora. Sí, a decir, yo, mira, a ver, yo avancé desde cero, ¿no? Sí, desde acá estuve 2 horas 25, es decir, me va a llevar 2 días como mínimo yo creo. A ver, el ágora y las termas. Descubre más sobre los espacios públicos comunes de Cirene y su función dentro de la ciudad. Usted tiene 9 paradas, 9 paradas. Carga, cierto que está en la mierda. 3 meses, pero imposible. Está mal ordenado, ya está mal ordenado. A ver. El primero de todos fue de Unity hace 5 meses, casi la mitad de un año que empecé con esto de Sirene ya. Digo, del canal. Ay, como vuela el tiempo, amigo.
Και κατόπιν τα αγαθά ηγόρασο παρά το πολιτήριον μετά πολύ μου χθήνε οι όστε και κόρια του πάση διασκεδάνησαν εν
Welcome to the Agora and Thermal Baths. Cyrene's Agora was the public marketplace and political hub of the city. Its central courtyard was open to the sky, while market stalls and shops ran along the sides, some neatly tucked away under long-roofed colonnades. As in other Greek cities, the Agora included a central hearth, known as a prytaneum. This place served as Cyrene's official embassy, where guests were welcomed to the city.
Espera que... No me cargó ningún comentario.
An unnamed statue representing naval victories was the centerpiece of the Agora. The statue's female figure likely represents Nike, the goddess of victory. It was likely very similar to the victory of Samothrace, which currently resides in the Louvre Museum and served as a reference for the team. The Cyrene Agora also displayed many temples and monuments celebrating its founding king, Batos, and the city gods. There were 2 altars associated with the Temple of Apollo and a marble statue base dedicated to the goddess Libya.
me da curiosidad, ¿cuántos años tenés? ¿Vos sabés? Yo, así que... A ver, si tuviese que adivinar, apuesto que estás entre los 14 y 16. Yo la tiro, por ahí.
The civic buildings included a law court complete with an archive library that would have housed legal documents and other papers essential to the city's governance. Traces of fire damage to the building's remains indicate that it was possibly destroyed during the rebellion of the Jewish community in 115 CE.
Ah, tribunal. Wow. Mira, épico. ¿Qué quiere, señora?
Φωνή μου αφήκνηται.
Public baths were common in Roman and Greek cities, and Cyrene held true to this tradition. 2 thermal baths from different eras were discovered among the ruins. An inscription at the entrance of one of the baths is presumed to be attributed to the owner. It dates the building to the Hellenistic period.
Sí, a ver qué dice. Los baños públicos eran comunes en las ciudades griegas y romanas y sirvieron a toda la tradición. Se descubrieron 2 baños de rana de la época distintas. No, pero hay que entrar, ¿cómo no? Che, ¿puedo? No, puedo hacer esto porque ¿qué? Me había preguntado cuántos años tenía. Si es de yo, me había preguntado eso y había dicho que posiblemente tenías entre 13 y entre 14 y 16 años. Vamos a hacerlo en el original de la cosa. Tengo 12. ¡Ah! Me equivoqué, la puta madre. Bueno, técnicamente por 2 años porque dije un mínimo de 14. Sos 3 años. No, para 3, sí, 3 años menor que yo. A ver, ¿qué es esto? No, los
Mosaics were originally created for practical reasons, the need to waterproof floors. Imported by Greeks in Egypt and Cyrenaica, the designs represented either scenes from daily life, marine fauna, or mythological figures. In addition to traditional Greek motifs, they also integrated concepts specific to Egyptian culture, such as the Nelumbo. The best examples of mosaics recovered to date, however, come from Alexandria. The Cyrene baths were fitted into an underground tomb dated somewhere between the 8th and 6th century BCE. Bath seats were carved directly in the rock, allowing for more comfortable ablutions. As with many of the public buildings, the thermal baths were elaborately decorated. Statues such as Aphrodite and Eros the Archer were discovered within.
Los baños sirenes se habilitaron en una tumba subterránea, mira, que databa entre los siglos 5, 6, 8 y 5, 6 antes de la era común. Se cavaron directamente bancos en la roca para hacer más cómodas las abluciones. Al igual que muchos edificios públicos, las termas estaban decoradas con gran detalle. No, de hecho, sabes que pregunté tu edad principalmente porque porque estoy viendo de qué suelen ser las personas que me miran. Todas suelen ser de entre 14 y 16, por lo que pregunté, así que bueno, por eso tiré esa edad. Que bueno, de hecho suelen ser muy pasajeras, como hay épocas. Me refiero a una semana donde había un pibe que me miraba, no sé por qué, y después se fue para siempre, no hablo más. Después otro y así sucesivamente, no sé, lastimosamente no me acuerdo de sus nombres, por lo menos no de la mayoría de ellos. Pero bueno, ahora estás vos. Qué raro, de hecho hasta un día hubo directos y en otro momento una chica de Chile. Es increíble, yo no entiendo por qué. Es como muy raro, ¿no? Que de repente se une una persona. Yo nunca entiendo por qué están acá mis directos durante algunos días. Es como... ¿Cómo nos aburre? Tío, no sé, ¿no es aburrido? A ver, simplemente juego y ni siquiera hablo mucho. A ver, no sé.
The Frigidarium, a pool of cold water, was the first room visitors entered. It was followed by the Tepidarium, or tepid water area, and then the hot water room called the Caldarium. Water for the thermal baths was sourced from a natural spring. Burning stones were deposited into the water to create steam as required. The flowing water of the spring ended in a cistern and fountain referred to as the Aqua Augusta.
Sé que esta agua está helada. ¿Sabes qué? Yo lo que hice es que me metí esta pileta fría y me tiré directamente caliente todo. Esa de las experiencias más satisfactorias, bro. En el lugar que iba había eso. Tipo, no sé por qué en la zona para pibes el agua estaba fría, pero que te cagabas de frío. Bueno, en la zona para gente en general estaba re frío, y en la pileta para pibes, así chiquititos, tipo 5 o 6 años, estaba súper caliente. Obviamente estaba súper caliente porque me daba a más no poder, la puta madre, porque siquiera me metí ahí. O sea, bueno, me metí con mis amigos, así para joder. En esa pileta había más pis que agua, no sabes lo caliente que estaba, la puta madre, qué asco, amigo.
Later Roman baths were built under Emperor Trajan and then restored under Hadrian. After the earthquake of 365 CE, they were replaced by baths of Byzantine design, with stones from the old thermal baths used in the reconstruction. The team relied on documentation describing the baths built under Trajan in order to create the location available in the game.
Esta es la parte, es como la canción más triste del juego, creo. Por lo menos. ¿Qué hizo? ¿Se sentó qué? No sé, me encanta. Bueno, no me encanta porque es triste, pero. ¿Qué? No, amigo, rarísimo, te puedes estar acá, épico. Qué raro, bro. Se rasca el pie, qué sucio. Wow. Te pica la pata. A ver, tengo tiempo hasta 11:30, ya deben ser 11:30, no, queda un tiempo. El templo de Zeus en Cirene. Descubre más sobre el templo de Zeus en Cirene. Claro, está que Zeus era la mitología griega, se me fue a equivocar. Sé porque en la romana Júpiter era Zeus y en la egipcia era Zeus. O era Ta. Puta. No sé, no me acuerdo cuál de todos era cuál.
Welcome to the Temple of Zeus in Cyrene. Facing east towards the rising sun stands the temple dedicated to the cult of Zeus. It was built sometime in the 5th century BCE. 70 meters long with 46 Doric-style columns, the imposing structure was the largest Greek temple erected in Africa. It was only slightly larger than the Parthenon and the Temple of Zeus in Olympia.
Enorme.
Me dijiste
Ay, no, que digo. Menos de una cuadra, pero sí. Vaya, también se puede. ¿Qué cosa? Acostarse en ese lugarcito que me acosté con Cleopatra.
The exterior was designed with the decorative elements common to Doric architecture. The dimensions of the columns were different, giving visitors an impression of uniqueness when viewing each facade.
Excavación de la Sirena en Libia, detalle. Sí, creo que eso se puede hacer con todos los personajes. Mira la cantidad de personajes que hay acá, bueno. Yo los hice todos igual. Pero bueno, me quedé con Cleopatra porque dije, bueno, qué padre, pero vamos con Valle comandante Pegas.
After the temple was destroyed during the Jewish rebellion, Emperor Hadrian had it reconstructed. He chose not to rebuild the outer portico, but did restore the new Corinthian columns in marble. The temple was later completed under Marcus Aurelius.
¿Qué dice? Decisión no era andar el portico externo porque el portico externo.
In the time of Augustus, a faithful but smaller imitation of the Olympian Zeus was used to be worshipped. Hadrian then installed a new 12-meter-high statue matching the Zeus in Olympia. It was made of chiseled marble with the head, arms, and feet carved in the round.
No, mira si era. Wow. Increíble, ¿no? Como en unos cuantos años. Sí. Como vamos. Esa civilización la vista como antigua. Se cae incluso. No sé, se imagina que en unos 5.000 años la capacidad intelectual promedio de las personas es de 400 de IQ y nos ven a nosotros como monos, ni menos. Es increíble.
Archaeologists confirmed that there was a monumental statue of Zeus in this temple, though experts remain divided on whether it was one of Zeus or one more specific to the cult of Zeus Ammon. The team elected to place a statue of Zeus Ammon in this location, knowing that Cyrene was central to the spread of this cult in the Greek Mediterranean area.
Monumentos importantes de Cirene. 9 paradas, qué larguito. Con esa batalla en la superioridad del pueblo y en la gente por eso.
Welcome to Important Monuments of Cyrene. The sanctuary of Apollo sits on a prominent edge of the plateau of Cyrene, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It could be accessed either by the road from Apollonia, via the necropolis, or by the Sacred Way, coming from the agora of the city. The abundance of temples and statues throughout the city reflect the various Greco-Roman and Egyptian cult influences over the centuries. Temples dedicated to Apollo, Cyrene, and Zeus stood alongside those of Ptolemaic gods, such as Serapis and Isis. Numerous fountains were decorated to represent other gods, including the city's namesake, Cyrene.
¿Dónde está la teta de esta mujer? Porque es como... Ah, eso es el bebé, claro.
A vestibule known as a propylaeum marked its entrance and highlighted the fountain of Apollo. God of the sun and of protection, Apollo was an important deity to both Greeks and Romans. The sanctuary built in his honor was considered to be sacred.
τα της πράξεως.
The imposing temple was built on a natural cornice, stretching more than 200 meters in length and roughly 50 meters in width, and was surrounded by a vast Doric colonnade. Sections uncovered by archaeologists indicate restorations to the columns were made between 115 and 116 CE.
¿Puedes elegir al personaje que sea en cualquier momento o solo en esto? Sí, lo puedes elegir en cualquier momento. Es decir, en el bueno, claro, en el modo del juego, en el modo del descubrimiento. En el juego base no. Y no sé, acá hay bastantes personajes que son como súper secundarios. Por ejemplo, a ver, está el actor ni idea cuando apareció. Pero bueno, apareció en algún momento de la historia y lo puedes usar acá. Vamos a buscar una mujer que aquí.
The altar was located in front of the temple. Both are estimated to be the same age, though restored at different times. Many bulls were sacrificed each year at the altar in honor of Apollo. The imprint in the stone of the ring used to strap the animals down is visible to this day.
Comparada a las demás, creo que más ajo. Mira lo que me encanta esto. Además, mira, por ejemplo, puedes ponerte el personaje de un pibe o una piba y a ver, vamos a ponerlo la de Shadia y trepar así como re tranquilo. Puedes tirar también el más alto lugar sin problema. Por ejemplo, tiramos unos más alto, a ver, desde acá al piso. Si me deja subir, ¿no? No me deja subir. Que a ver, bueno, pasa que no hay tampoco un punto altísimo. A ver. Tranquilo.
Κομισέι, εκείκο! Αντίπατρος και αρσινόι, χωρίου διορίγματος έγκυσιτήν.
Carved during the Roman era, the Apollo Cytharide was discovered near the temple. It is considered an important archaeological find. The statue of Apollo was in pieces when it was uncovered. Remarkably, most fragments were found, and the restored statue is currently at the British Museum. The team extrapolated the statue's final look based on the current partial reconstruction and placed it inside the temple to reflect the patron deity of the area.
Se cree que va a ser tipo, va a tener una jugabilidad parecida a la de Uncharted. Eso me llama mucho la atención, ¿no? Incluso con eso para que
The amphitheater of Cyrene is located on what is known as the Terrace of Myrtosa, next to the sanctuary of Apollo. It was built on top of the old theater in the 2nd century. Originally used as a stage, the theater became an amphitheater once the taste for Roman gladiatorial entertainment reached the city.
Το θηρίο εμένησε. Είτε.
Mira, nos podemos poner a rezar. Aquí se supone. Estamos mirando el cura,
Entrances were placed at both ends of the amphitheater. A wall replaced the first 2 rows of bleachers as protection from the array of wild animals in the ring. The tunnel used for the parade of beasts and gladiators circled the arena, unlike the Roman Colosseum's tunnel, which was beneath the amphitheater. The basement and corridors accommodated both the gladiators and the animals, and included lifts that raised the traps into the arena's center.
Tal cual un remaster de la Assassin's Creed 1, te imaginas, boludo. Así, tipo, no los remaster que lo único que se encargan de hacer es hacer que el juego esté disponible para la consola de última generación, no, un remake así con las ciudades todo rediseñado, con unos gráficos increíbles que está a la par de juegos de la más nuevos de, no sé, de la generación. Y ahí yo también lo comparto porque Altair vive enlazado. No sé por qué es el asesino al que más cariño le agarré, a pesar de no ser muy carismático, de no hablar mucho, no ser muy como Ezio Connor. Es como el que más mal la pasó, no sé, el peor la pasó de todo. La historia fue el asesino de ahora se saca la capucha, por ejemplo. No sé, como además se murió su hijo menor, mataron a su esposa, su maestro realmente fue el que hizo que la orden de los más correctos, entre otras cosas. Claro, sí, porque el remaster suele ser un juego que cambia poco y nada del juego en sí, solo lo hacen compatible con la consola más nueva, y encima le ponen un montón de plata.
Since the original theater was close to the cliffside, the expansion didn't allow for a perfect circle. Instead, junctions of the semicircle formed the arena into an oval shape. This elliptical formation still ensured an excellent view from all angles. The team decided to create a perfectly round theater for technical reasons and used the structure of the Roman theater as their reference.
Bueno, amigo, me voy a ir. Mañana jugaré, mañana día de clase, de escuela. Dios, qué terrible. Qué terrible. En fin, amigo. Nos vemos mañana, si es que te pasas por el directo. Nos vemos igual.